Welcome to our viewer on our atomic adventures. Let's see what we're up to today. Who knows, we might have some fun and even a dance on the way.
Welcome to part 8 of the Life of Tom Ploy. And in this video, we are covering years 49 to 56. And let's start with some good news for a change. Tom had thrown himself.
Down the stairs?
No, thrown himself into his art and had even started to get a name for himself. And as we mentioned, he was chatting with fellow artists and models on the now defunct MySpace, and was now in the envious position that he would be asked by mainly women if he'd like them to forward images of themselves for him to paint.
Sounds harmless. And it would have been rude not to.
It was, and totally consensual. And you have to remember they were very different times back then. I suppose for him it was the technical side of painting the human form, male or female, he was interested in.
If you say so.
As it's always been said, the hardest thing to produce is the human face and the capture of different materials.
Do you only have to look at the latest images in video games, as it's often the face that breaks the realism? Even the smartest of AI still struggle to represent a lifelike replica, but they are getting there. Not that he could do any better perfection-wise.
I don't think that was his intention, but I'll ask. Yep, he said no. As mentioned previously, the vast majority of models were female in the art world, but there were also some great male models out there, and the task to capture a more muscular physique was a challenge by itself. It was getting harder.
Where are you going with this?
No, it was getting more difficult due to cutbacks to find suitable life drawing classes.
Lack of models?
No, there were plenty of models and a lot of people who wanted to draw them. But as times were becoming financially more difficult, it became too expensive to hire a venue. Models and a tutor, and many of these people had to leave the profession.
So what did they do?
Things took a more relaxed approach, and luckily a few things were offered. An unused venue was found, albeit unsuitable for any official use. But it would be suitable for a motley crew of amateurs. And the lack of a tutor was a drawback.
I see what you did then.
It was decided to give it a chance, and with a dozen or so people willing to share the cost of hiring a model, things were put in place. Many previous drawing classes were for 2 hours, but it just wasn't viable for a model to travel for an hour for 2 hours' work. But they had a cunning plan to increase the time to 3 hours and offer a higher rate of pay than the colleges and formal groups were willing or able to match. So a 10-week trial was undertaken, and albeit not ideal, it worked out well. And another 10 weeks were arranged, and the facilities improved to enable refreshments to be consumed, and this kept the momentum going. I think with any group of people who have a similar interest, we mentioned that pretty much 90% of models are female, and it was soon obvious that by the block of classes that 80% of the group of artists were also women, and people come and go, but that ratio stayed the same. At the beginning of this video, you found us back in the studio painting, and as we discovered, Tom met a local model through one of the classes he attended, who would become his friend and his muse for 6 years. The majority of his work was with her, as she had a rare talent where she could portray different characters for different styles and scenarios. He also involved himself in one of the UK's soap operas, and they were very helpful with supplying him with reference material that he could use in his biggest work of 3 by 1.5 metres containing 19 people. And probably the only time he painted fruit or animal.
The chance to have his work hung in several galleries and exhibitions, which was just becoming financially beneficial when the stock market crash occurred and all of a sudden belts were tightened and the market was gone. And due to this, and it was also around the time where he started to notice a reduction of the precision in his fingers.
Especially in the cold, making it difficult to hold brushes, these two circumstances became the start of the end of another passion.
Anyway, back to the script.
We would like to say that his health was on the up. It was at this point in time that the first signs that the arthritis in his neck was starting to affect him, and gentle exercise and a regime of regular mobilisation became a regular implementation. It started with pins and needles in the tips of his finger, but we'll discover it didn't stop there.
This was also the time when it becomes obvious that you're probably seeing a lot of your GP when you're now on first name terms.
It is also not the first times painkillers have become an issue. This is when the London Olympics were on. It had always been on his bucket list, and he was not going to miss the chance, even if he had to be extra medicated with a stronger dose to get through. And that is the problem with opioids, is that they work and reduce the pain very effectively.
For a while anyway.
Indeed. And as he'd had years of use with little problems, it had never been as hard as this to reduce the amount of medication. But this is where it differed, as it was no longer a need to take them. It became a craving, and in the end he had to go cold turkey.
One of the hardest things to encounter and difficult to go through without support.
And the frustrating thing is, when you get a new GP, they still want you to try different versions of the drug, but predictably with the same results. Buprenorphine patches are a prime example. They are administered in a similar way to nicotine slow-release patches. You'd replace them every 3 to 4 days. And my goodness, did they work, and so well.
Thank goodness for that.
Right up until he had a reaction to them.
What did it do?
After just a few hours, the new patch-covered skin would start to blister and the patch would begin to peel off, and a new one added to a different area, as you see from the image.
This is the first time where he went cold turkey and the experience was grim.
To say the least. They also had a new arrival to the house from a local dog rescue charity who had an open day where the dogs were introduced to the public. The one they met bounded up to them and almost swallowed his hand in its mouth. Even with that, you didn't get any negative feelings with him. And home he came, and the best way to describe him was as nutty as a squirrel's dinner. Bill was one of those dogs that just wanted to please, so was easy to train. He would get excited in play, but if he was closing his mouth a little too much, all you had to say was no biting Bill, and it would go to a gentle nibble. For such a gentle beast, his bark was deep and a warning to anyone you wanted to discourage, and could bark on command. He would balance treats on his nose until you said, "Ready, steady, go," and on go would flip the treat up and devour it. And once, when he was doing his nose balancing trick, we got distracted and meant he was forgotten for 10 minutes, but on return, he was still sitting there with a biscuit on his nose. Bill was one of the only dog I've met that loved nothing more than a firework display. As soon as he heard the first whoosh, his tail wagging and getting very excited, and would run around the garden barking at all the lights in the sky. And we must leave it there, but we will return to some of these in the next video. But before we go, if you would like to know more about CRPS, there is a link in the descriptions below to a clip by Professor Hanna. The Life of Tom Ploy is a Foul Attire production. And again, hold on to your hats as we pad out with a little music.
Song about soul, rhythmic music, nostalgic with a rich, heavy sky, two-tone sound, including trumpet, saxophone, bass changes in pass with highlighting the brass and the bass. Write a song about slow, rhythmic music, nostalgic with a rich, heavy sky and two-tone sound, including trumpet, saxophone, bass changes in pass with highlighting the brass and bass. Write a song about slow, rhythmic music, nostalgic with a rich, heavy sky and two-tone sound, including trumpet, saxophone, bass changes in pass with highlighting the brass and bass. About slow, rhythmic music, nostalgic with a rich, heavy sky and two-tone sound, including trumpet, saxophone, bass changes and pass with highlighting the brass and bass trends and bass. Write a song about slow, rhythmic music, nostalgic with a rich, heavy sky and two-tone sound, including trumpet, saxophone, bass changes and pass with highlighting the brass and bass trends and bass. And bass. About slow, rhythmic music, nostalgic with a rich, heavy sky and two-tone sound, including trumpet, saxophone, bass changes and pass with highlighting the brass and pass with on bass changes and bass changes and pass with on bass changes and bass and on bass changes and bass and on bass changes and on bass changes and bass.
And remember what his wife said, life's a bitch, and then you die.